Okay, so now let's work on implementing our two remove methods. One is a remove at index method, and one is the remove method where you just pass an object and it removes that object from the list. Let's look at this one first. It returns E, and it's called remove, and it takes one argument that's an int. Removes the element at the specified position in this list, shifts any subsequent elements to the left, subtracts one from their indices, returns the element that was removed from this list. And also, it throws an index out of bounds exceptions if the index is out of range, which is this condition here. So let's actually get started by putting in that section into our code. Right at the beginning of our remove method, we'll say if this, then we're going to want to throw the new index out of bounds exception, just like that. And we'll change these index to be I, because that's what we're calling it right here. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, we know that I is within bounds if we get to this point in our code. So let's actually just start doing this remove. Since we already have a remove in our iterator, it seems like it will be pretty easy to just utilize that remove in this remove method. So let's actually make an iterator for our list. Iterator equals this dot iterator. We're calling our iterator method here to get an iterator for our list. And now we're going to want to call .next a certain number of times so that we get up to the index that we want to return. So I'm going to say for int j equals 0, j is less than I, so we're going to call it, we're going to run this loop I times, and then I plus plus, or actually j plus plus, sorry. And then we are going to say iterator.next so that we advance the iterator in each iteration of this loop. And so after this loop, we will have called next I number of times. So that's actually one less than the number of times we're going to need to call it. But the last time we call it, we actually want to save what the element is at that index, because that's the one that we want to remove, and that's the one that we have to return. So we're going to save that element from our call to next, and then we're going to actually call remove to remove that element from the list, and then we will return that element. And that should be good for that remove method. Let's test it to make sure that it works. So we have a list, and we've added 4 things to it. And now let's do list.remove at, how about 0? So that should remove the first element from the list. What's going to happen in our code in this case is this loop's actually not going to run at all. It's going to run 0 times, and then we're going to call next once to get the first element, and then we're going to call remove to remove that element, and then we're going to return that element. So let's try that out. Let's print out the list afterwards so that we can see if it actually worked or not. Whoops, shouldn't be E, this is S, because we have a list of S's. And so here we're going to do system.out.println S. So what should we expect this to output is 2, 3, 4 with no 1 on there. So let's run it and see what we get. Oh, whoops, we didn't want this here either. We wanted list, because that's the name of the list that we're trying to loop through. Let's run it. And we see 2, 3, 4, so it looks like it worked in that case. Let's try removing 3 this time. 3 is going to be the last element. So after we run this, we should get 1, 2, 3. Looks like that works. Let's try something in the middle, like 1. That's going to remove the 2 from the list. So now we should get 1, 3, 4, which is what we got here. So it looks like that remove method is working. Let's move on to our other remove method. Let's find the documentation here for it. Remove object O returns a boolean. It removes the first occurrence of the specified element from this list if it is present. If this list does not contain the element, it is unchanged. More formally, removes the element with the lowest index I such that this is true. Returns true if this list contains the specified element. Okay, so if we're actually returning something, we want to return true. Or if we're actually removing something, we want to return true. And we remove it if this is true, basically, for some index I. Let's once again loop through with an iterator for this method. Let's find it here. Here we go, remove. Let's loop through our list with an iterator. So let's make an iterator. Iterator equals this dot iterator. And we'll loop while iterator dot has next. That means there's still an element coming. And then for each element, let's get the element we're going to test. Iterator dot next, that'll get us the next element. Now we want to determine whether we should call remove to remove that element or not. And we want to remove it if this turns out to be true. So I'm going to copy that into here. And you'll notice in this we're saying get I. Instead of get I, we already have the element that we want to compare. So I'm going to change that to E. And I'll change this to E as well. So now if that was true, then what we want to do is call iterator.remove to remove that element from the list. And then we're going to return true because we found one to remove and we removed it. And the list was changed. If we get through this whole loop and we didn't remove anything, then we will return false, just like that. Now let's test it to make sure that it works. So now, instead of putting an index in here, we want to put the actual thing that we're trying to remove. So let's try putting a 1, just like that. So that's going to remove this element from the list. Let's run it, and we should see 2, 3, 4. Look like it worked correctly. Let's try 4 in here to remove that last element there. Okay, good. Let's try just one more to make sure it's working. Okay, and then one more good test to do in this case is to make sure that it's only removing one thing from the list. So if we have 2 elements that are actually the string 1 in the list, and then we remove 1, we actually only want to remove the first one and not the last one. So if we run that, we should get 2, 3, 4, 1. And it looks like we do. So it looks like our remove methods are working correctly.